So, we have talked in the past about the almost comically hilarious ways that smugglers have been, should we say, smuggling meat into the UK almost as easily as you would see it in some sort of Tom and Jerry cartoon, some sort of, suspicious, casual whistling while, slipping past the customs checkpoint. It almost feels as if that is what is going on. But we're not going to be, well, we are going to be talking about that a bit more and what is exactly going on at the border because, to no one's surprise, guess what? Meat smuggling is at an all-time high. Who knew this would be such a profitable business? But turns out it is. Uh, Instead, I wanted to quickly talk about, before we get more into this, what the consequences of this really are. You see, most of this meat is coming from countries in particular that don't have the highest animal welfare standards or even disease control standards either. You've got at the moment in Russia, avian flu wiped out a large proportion of their chickens. That's why just a couple of months, well, just last year, you may remember, we talked about the big egg shortage that happened in Russia. That is still a thing. So you've got to watch, if you are a country on your border, that avian flu does not get into your country because it is going to decimate your poultry industry. Same, of course, for swine flu. If that somehow ends up in the UK through one of these, meat smuggling operations, that is going to have a big, big consequence. But of course, the other big consequence might be that maybe, because, historically this has been a thing, that these diseases that are normally, synonymous with animals make the jump to humans, and that's where we can have potentially another pandemic on our hands. So having these controls in place is pretty serious. It is pretty serious that you have these controls in place. But remember, we've currently, well, for at least the next 6 weeks at least, got an absolutely comical control government in charge who really did not consider the ramifications of what they seem to be doing at the time, let alone what they even seem to be talking about when it comes to border checks. Oh, bless me. Anyway, so before we do get on into this and talk about this explosion of meat smuggling that's going on at the moment, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page, the donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, well, buy me coffee. There's the YouTube thank you button. And of course, as always, there is the Pony Club down below as well. So let's crack on into this. So this comes from Farmers Weekly, the title of Meat Smugglers Using English Vehicles to Evade Border Checks. Criminal gangs are buying English registered coaches, vans, and to smuggle large amounts of illegal meat into the country, Farmers Weekly has now learned. Commercial quantities. So, if you've ever heard of that unit of measure, a commercial quantity, we're not talking small things here. We're talking big, big things. And the fact that they are trying to get coaches, I mean, a coach smuggling meat. Who would have believed it until, we read it here in Farmers Weekly? But there you go. Anyway, these commercial quantities of illegal and diseased meat are now entering the UK to be sold into fast food outlets, pubs, and to, quote, unscrupulous manufacturers in an online meeting between the meat industry and representatives of the border officials was told on the 17th of May. Tony Goodidger and the Association of Independent Meat Suppliers, who attended the meeting, said that criminals are now finding novel ways to smuggle meat into the country. What a surprise. Because the checks aren't fully in place, because they have not been thought out to any degree, criminals are going to sort of have a go at this. They're going to sort of try and get around all these things. This is something we have been constantly talking about on this channel since what, 17, 16, maybe. So we've been talking about this a good while, and yet you'd think that the government has been in place all that while, and yet these checks, the EU has done it. you know, Netherlands, the Belgium, French, all managed to do implement these checks very easily. The UK, I don't know. And bear in mind, this is because of the government. This is no other reason because of the government we have had. And like I said, we're about to change this government very soon. So things, hopefully, fingers crossed, should improve. I do think they will improve, but put it this way, we're probably going to go from worse to maybe bad, which, to be honest, will be a step up. Who knows? We might go from worse to good, which would be a massive improvement on that front. But like I said, we'll find out. So where are we? So yes, here we are. So many, of course, are coming here in vehicles with foreign number plates, as they realise that they are now more likely to be stopped and checked. He added. They also know that they've travelled to Dover in a refrigerated lorry. Refrigerated lorry. They will be diverted inland to the border control post 22 miles away at Sevington in Kent. They are now buying old English coaches and loading them full of illegal meat and driving these through the border because they know they won't get stopped, he said. Wonderful, wonderful news to hear, isn't it? Anyway, however, at Stevington, many vehicles are now not being checked due to staff shortages, but all businesses are being charged for the import checks. We talked about this again, staff problems, not even ready for these checks. Anyway, meanwhile, Mr. Goodidger said that no checks were being made on any vehicles on going to the Channel Tunnel at Correos in France and when they arrive at Folkestone, Kent. New border controls on the import of plants, animal products, and food in the UK have now been in place for almost a month. But Mr. Goodidger accused the UK government of quote doing nothing to take the steps to actually prevent major animal disease outbreaks such as African swine fever and foot and mouth disease. And that, as I said at the beginning of this, is a major problem. You could have a big outbreak of, African swine flu or even foot and mouth. So we have to take this seriously. We have to get this sorted out. And it is because we have had such a government who did not care. Hang on, we'll just move away from that picture of the meat for a second. So yeah, we do know that some of this has been going on. We've known about this. Experts have warned about this time and time again, and yet they have just been ignored. Why? Because you've had, as we talked about recently, the European Scrutiny Committee, controlled by Brexiteers. So they're not interested in listening to these experts who are saying, hey, your border controls really aren't the best. You haven't really thought out a good plan of how to deal with some of this stuff. So I keep on saying it, but when we change government, a lot of things are going to change. It is not just who is the prime minister. It's not just who takes the top ministerial jobs. It is going to be through all levels of the government. We are going to see a seismic change. And that is going to be a big improvement. Big improvement on a lot of things for this. So, since September of 2022, the Port of Dover Health Authority has seized more than 90 tons of illegal meat, of which 67 tons were from countries with African swine flu. So, honestly, I've said this before. I would not be surprised. I would not be surprised if we end up having an outbreak. I would not be surprised if we end up having an outbreak on this. Honestly, it just seems almost, when you've got stuff like this happening, it's just almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy at this point. But Just unbelievable. Just words fail you. They really do. But, this is actually happening. Anyway, health chief described this as just the tip of the iceberg. They said, in addition to the domestic pork markets, the pork markets, the authority has now seized illegal wild boar, poultry, and beef since the April 1st of 2024, including 43 whole lamb carcasses. Luki Mandelzo, the PhD port of health, the head of Port Health and Public Prosecution, said that this now is critical that DEFRA and the UK government now reconsider near 70% funding cuts to the ACF checks at Dover. So think about that for a second. The UK government cut funding by about 70% for African swine flu at Dover. Anyway, leaving food to travel now uncontrolled and freely to self is very self-present at this facility just 22 miles away at Sevington, where there is no one in Dover. Almost an entirely now needless risk, she added. The UK government spokesperson said, "We are now unequivocal that the sale of illegal meat products is unacceptable. This is why suspected products continuing to be checked at the border to ensure that they do not reach our shores." Well, we just heard how good those checks are going. The recent volume of seizures does demonstrate that border operating models are working. But of course, how much has gotten through? Yes, you've managed to seize about 90 tons since September of 2022. But the big question is, how many much tons, and let's say it, tons, how much actually got through? I don't know. I'm not that confident, you know? Um, Maybe this is something we need to look into, you know? Maybe we need to, get one of the committees or have an inquiry into this to find out what's going on. I prefer maybe an inquiry because then at least you can have just appoint someone independent to sort of lead this and say, well, this is what we're going, this is what's going on. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But hey, I do hope this is on the radar. I know Sue Gray has written like the problems that she has foreseen and sort of planning for, which, by the way, I just want to stress again, is good. Like the very fact that we have a government that is suddenly thinking forward planning of, well, this might be an issue. So we're coming up with a plan to try and either stop this issue from happening, or if it does happen, we've got a plan in place to try and, help sort this out. The very fact that we've got that, you know, so a lot of people sounds, well, sure, shouldn't a government be doing that anyway? We have had multiple governments for years, probably since 2019, who just have not thought about forward thinking planning. And yet, oh, if the Labour government gets in, that's going to be no difference whatsoever. Anyway, as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, as always, do check out the links below, the Patreon page, the Buy Me Coffee link, the YouTube thank you button, and of course, the Pony Club down below as well. And of course, as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you all very soon.